Hey, deep divers, before we jump in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and leave us a comment below. We love hearing from you. So are you ready for this? We're going deep into the mind of Seth Meyers just a few days before the election.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, we're dissecting his interview on the Last Laugh podcast
Okay.
to see what he's thinking
Yeah.
about the election, late night comedy, and how his career has gotten kind of strangely tied up with politics.
It is really fascinating, how upfront he is about being nervous about the election.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't just say, oh, I'm a little uneasy. He really connects his own feelings to what everyone's feeling right now.
It's interesting, though, because he says that, like, actually reacting to the news as it happens on his show is kind of a relief.
Oh, interesting.
So he's not trying to plan out bits weeks in advance.
Oh, good.
It's like he's embracing the chaos.
Yeah, he basically says it's impossible to guess what's going to happen next. I mean, things are just so unpredictable, right?
Yeah.
So instead, he uses his show as a way to sort of work through everything, along with the audience.
Yeah, and you could tell it's not just jokes for him. Like, this stuff really gets to him. Remember that story about Trump and Arnold Palmer?
Oh, yeah. When he talked about Arnold Palmer's,
Yeah.
I know what you mean. And he heard that on vacation.
Yeah.
And he had such a strong reaction to it. I think it just shows how this kind of politics just gets into everything.
It does. It's like this feeling of absurdity is everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you get people asking comedians like, oh, isn't this great for material?
I know. And Myers, what he said about that was so interesting. He said he would give up all the good material for a less crazy reality. And you could tell he meant it. He even talked about feeling this wave of relief when Biden initially won.
Yeah, which I think really proves that comedians aren't like secretly loving all this chaos. They're just living through it like the rest of us.
It's funny. Myers' late night career really took off around the same time Trump's political career did. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like their careers are connected somehow. But it's important to remember that for Myers, it's not really about Trump himself.
Right.
It's about what he represents,
Yeah.
in the bigger picture.
Yeah, like he'd be totally fine moving on if Trump was out of the picture.
Exactly. It's all about responding to what's happening in the world, not being fixated on one person.
Oh, and speaking of unexpected moments, we have to talk about the ice cream incident.
Oh, yeah. That story about Myers and Biden both holding ice cream cones.
Yeah.
While Biden's getting grilled about Gaza. That was wild.
It's this bizarrely funny image that shows how Myers can end up in the middle of the news, even when he's trying to stay out of it.
It's just so funny to me how even in serious situations, life can just throw these completely ridiculous curveballs at you. I mean, even presidents eat ice cream, right? Okay, but let's switch gears for a second and talk about Myers' interview with JD Vance. This is where we see Myers really thinking about what it means to give someone a platform.
Yeah, and this wasn't just any interview. It happened way back in 2017 when everyone was talking about this new wave of conservatism.
Exactly. And you can really hear the disappointment in Myers' voice when he talks about what's happened with Vance since then.
Yeah, it's almost like he's wondering if he should have given Vance that platform in the first place. Especially with how Vance's views have changed. It makes you think about the role of these late night shows, how they shape the conversation.
It's a question we all have to think about. Who do we give a voice to? And what could happen because of that? It's interesting. This interview really shows a side of Seth Meyers we don't usually see. Like someone who's really thinking about his influence and the decisions he makes as a late night host.
Totally. And speaking of decisions, his choice not to do a live show on election night is pretty fascinating. Kind of a bold move when you think about how many other late night shows are going live to give their commentary in real time.
It really is. He'd rather take the time to put together a thoughtful response than just react in the moment. And honestly, after the last few elections, can you blame him?
He even talked about how much he enjoyed doing that live closer look segment for the presidential debate, but also how he liked having the time to process everything the next day.
Oh, right. That's kind of the key to his comedy, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
not about those gut reactions. It's about stepping back, analyzing, and then delivering that well-crafted comedic punch. It's more about depth than speed.
Which makes a lot of sense, especially when you think about how crazy election night could be. Who knows what's going to happen? It could be super close and drag on for days.
Exactly. And trying to wrap things up neatly in the middle of all that, as Myers put it, is a whole other challenge. Live TV is already a bit of a gamble, and then you add a potentially wild election on top of that.
But here's what I found reassuring. No matter what happens, Meyer seems pretty confident that his show will adapt. He even talked about his improv background and how being able to yes and any situation will help him.
Yeah, it shows how flexible he is, both as a comedian and a commentator. It doesn't matter what the outcome is, whether it's happy, disappointing, whatever, a closer look will still be there, giving us some comedic relief and insightful commentary. I think it speaks to his ability to find humor even in the toughest times.
And I think that's why a closer look connects with so many people. It can adapt, it's insightful, and it always manages to find the funny side of things no matter how tough they get. It's kind of comforting to know that no matter how wild things get, we can count on Myers to help us make sense of it all, one joke at a time.
Definitely. I think Seth Meyers is really a unique voice in late night. He's able to walk this line between humor and genuine concern, and he does it with intelligence and wit. He's not just a comedian, he's like a cultural commentator, helping us navigate this crazy world. Okay, so now let's wrap up with some final thoughts and maybe something for everyone to think about regarding the future of late night comedy as things in politics keep changing.
I mean, we've really covered a lot in this deep dive into Seth Meyers' world,
Hmm.
from the election to the future of late night comedy.
And what I think is so interesting is that Myers really gives us a way to think about politics without getting totally overwhelmed.
Right.
He finds that balance between humor and actually caring, which I think is so important right now.
Yeah, it's like he gets it. He understands the craziness and the anxiety we're all feeling, but he's not letting us get stuck there.
Yeah,
He uses comedy to deal with it all and figure out how to keep going.
exactly. And that leads to a really big question. What will late night comedy look like in the future? Especially as politics keep changing.
Right. Will it get even more sharp and satirical,
Yeah.
or will it try to find some common ground and bring people together?
It's tough to say for sure, but I think one thing's for certain, late night comedy is going to stay a big part of our culture.
Yeah,
It's a place where we can laugh, think critically, and maybe even find some hope in all the chaos.
I love that. And I think Seth Meyers, with his mix of humor and heart, is going to be a really interesting voice to follow as this all plays out.
Yeah,
He's not just a comedian. He's a reflection of what's happening right now.
totally. His journey is so connected to everything going on in politics and culture. It'll be interesting to see how he adapts as we move forward.
Well said. And on that note, deep divers, we're wrapping up this deep dive. But before we go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment with your thoughts on the future of late night comedy. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next deep dive.